This is a simple palette, just white, cad lemon, cad yellow medium, cad red light, alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, raw umber, chrome green, phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, and black. Normally I like sap green instead of chrome green. I just don't have any right now. And ultramarine isn't my favorite blue. I like indigo better, but it's pretty close. I put out a pretty tiny amount of paint. I'll probably be replacing it often, but part of that can be a little bit of discipline, knowing that I shouldn't paint. You know, when I run out of paint, I got to stop, right? But I need to stop anyway because I have to remember to stand back to my work and evaluate it, right? So I'm going to keep this sitting super simple. It's going to be about abstract shapes, about relationships of what I see when I squint my eyes. I'm going to trust what I see when I squint. I'm going to know that my first guesses are not going to be right, and they'll get more right when I can compare them to more stuff. So I'm going to be moving around. I'm going to be moving around the scene pretty rapidly. I don't know. I guess rapidly is relative because I like to do a lot of quick alla primas too. But I don't know. My goal is to cover the whole thing except for one key aspect. I'm going to try to complete the base that the cloth will sit on top of as if the cloth wasn't there. Well, yes and no. It's going to feel like the holes between the lace weaves, you're seeing through them to the layer behind it. So part of the background will be as if there's more lace on the other side of, say, like a table, perhaps. And some of it is going to just be, you know, looking at a kind of just a space under a table, just so dark. So without much yammering, I am going to go. Okay, so just going to oil up the surface a little bit. My medium is just black oil. I cook it myself. It's just lead monoxide with cold pressed linseed oil. I normally don't do a full underpainting. What's that shadow doing? Is that this? My lighting setup has a piece of tinfoil blocking the light that's hitting my board from getting into the shadows of my still life. And so I really like a nice single light source unless I really intentionally have like a light that's really strong and a weak second light. But I want that to be really intentional, not what I'm stuck with. So this is more of a single light source that I can play with. I am going to start with an area that's pretty innocuous. I don't have to worry too much about getting this exactly right. So I think this will be a fine place to start. I'm going to be looking for areas to just kind of modify as I go. Some of the shapes aren't going to be perfect, and I'm going to redraw as I go. That's part of the allure of painting for me is kind of to figure out the painting as I go, not haphazardly. I like to do you know, simple measurements. I like to take educated guesses, and I've been at this for a long time, so my educated guesses have gotten better over time, but they're not perfect. I'm going to make some decisions that on the first sitting that just will not work, and I'm okay with that. I've just got to move, right? I just got to keep moving forward. So this basket, I can show you in just a second. This basket has a lot of intricacy. I'm not going to bother getting all the individual weaves on this sitting. I'm going to do that by drawing on top of this sort of mid-tone base. And I could do it with having already established it and then glaze over it. But again, I'm still drawing correcting. And if the big squint level shapes don't work, then the detail shapes probably need a lot of work to get, you know, in there accurately. So I'm not gonna do detail that I have to undo if all goes well. And I'm really hoping that all goes well. So let's see. Did I disturb all the cameras properly to where everyone got vertigo and are upset with me? Sure hope not. So I sure appreciate you being here. All right, so again, I'm not worried so much that this mass is made up of tiny little weaves. There's a system to it that I'm going to figure out the system, but I'm not going to. I mean, I'm not going to worry about it if my weave count isn't the same. If it's close, I'm going to be good with that. I don't want to have that sort of pressure of making it exactly like this basket. I'm going to get it pretty close, I think, you know, based on my previous paintings. I think I have. But if I get the anatomy of this basket right, which takes just a little bit of figuring out, if I get this anatomy right, then I can make a very believable basket, even if it doesn't have the same number of vertical lines, or you know, it's not exact, you know. So I'm gonna cross that bridge when I get to it. For right now, it's just about squint level shapes. You'll also see from when I turn the camera that the weaves leave little slots that you can see shells through. That's going to be so cool to have, but I'm not ready for it yet. So again, you could probably do this a different way with a different strategy, and I'm open to trying paintings in different ways. And you know, maybe if I did this painting a second time, I would do it a slightly different way. But you know, this is the way I'm kind of compelled to do it on this sitting. And maybe over time I'll talk about other options. But again, this is the way I want to do it for this one. The reason I like abstraction so much is because I don't like to measure every little thing, right? I don't like to feel like I'm trapped to make this exactly like the basket anyway. I don't feel like I owe the setup anything, but I want to convince the viewers that there is a sense of light wrapping around this basket. I want it to feel like it's the same light that's hitting all the shells, and I'm quite willing to allow the viewer to see a version of the shell that may, or the basket that may not be exactly like this basket, but they'll be invited into a realistic space that they'll have the feel that it is a basket, that it's made of these little weaves of wicker, or what, I don't know what exactly it is, but I guess I'll call it wicker, wicker basket. I don't know. So I have light, I have deep shadow, and now I have some reflected light. The reflected light gets pretty bold when it gets down here. I see that when I squint, so it becomes a worthwhile shape. Most of the time, reflected light can just be simplified away for that first sitting. Normally I'm not painting this thin. I'm painting this thin just because it's tentative, because this is the place I'm starting, and there's not a whole lot of information to feel whether it's right or wrong. Right now, I feel like it's pretty good, but I'll know better later. So right now, I'm not doing intentionally vertical strokes. If I start doing vertical strokes, then you might see me then just almost automatically start countering the brush stroke. That's going to give it a little bit of softness, and it just more volume than worrying about it being a basket weave yet. I'd rather do this abstractly. So when I'm squinting abstractly, yes, I see those really bold shapes of light coming through the basket. And that might necessitate this just getting a little bit darker, but it's just a start. It's just a guess. You know, I'm going to get more information in there later. Maybe I'll even test a little slat and see if it's a good value for what has to shine through it. Again, this is just all a guess, and I don't want to feel completely wed to it, and that's why I started here. It's a big foundational shape. It'll help me read the intensity of the shells. It'll help me read a good value for the background and the cast shadow that comes across here. So I don't know. It's as good a guess as any for right now, and we'll see if it's successful by the way all the other shapes come in. But I can take the pressure off of it. I don't have to even talk about it in terms of good, bad, pretty, ugly, right, wrong. None of that's really helpful yet, because if I put it into those terms, then now I've instituted pressure and I've attached my ego to it, and I just, you know, I don't feel like that's even helpful right now. If it's a little bit off, then that's okay, because when I go to adjust it, it'll be in the context of all the other things that I am deeming important, and it'll just create a harmony. So I'm not worried about accuracy yet. I'm worried about simplicity and abstraction. I'm squinting my eyes. I'm seeing what's essential in the painting, and hopefully paint no more than that. If I get too mired into what a basket looks like, I might be capturing good basket shapes, but am I capturing this basket in this light? And so I say that with portrait a lot. If you want to capture a model and you're thinking, this is an eye, and this is a nose, and this is a mouth, you might paint really good shapes of eyes, nose, and mouth, but are you getting this unique model in that unique light? And to me, that's super important, to not paint so generically, then to have to try to retrofit a likeness in. So a couple things there is that if I did bother to learn my anatomy, which I did, then that's going to just be a part of the way that I problem solve and see. So it was very worthwhile that I learned anatomy, that I learned how to do schematics, that I learned how to do many portrait sketches from life that then I can apply into the next one, right? I'm simply not going to turn off that skill. It won't happen. It's just part of the way I see. And that doesn't come cheap. That comes through years and years and years of study. But it's also true too that I'm squinting and abstracting. So it's not like I'm drawing kind of prefabricated shapes. I'm painting the real shapes. And you know, with like a schematic approach, like, you know, you take Loomis. I love Loomis. Great. I mean, just amazing. Of all the different schematic techniques, I like Loomis the best. I'm in a lot of good company for that. But what I find a little difficult with Loomis is that, you know, a lot of the landmarks that you want to capture are going to be hidden, right? If you have a big old beard or a big swath of hair, you're not seeing the forehead and top of the cranium. You're seeing hair. You're not seeing a big old, I mean, you're not seeing a chin, you're seeing a big old beard, right? So, or like a hat, you know, you have to take a guess as to what you think those shapes look like under the hat. So I'd rather squint and simplify and paint what I really see, and my sense of anatomy that I've built up over time, my ability to diagnose problems based on anatomy, that just makes my abstraction better. But I like to treat everything abstract first. So I'm squinting at this. I see the need to maybe drop the handle a little bit and maybe shrink the basket as I go, which is again why I don't want to perfect anything yet. I still want the option to make decision, to make the composition work. I don't really want to expand that handle any higher on the composition. At best, maybe just barely, but I know I don't want to encroach into that space. I like my design, having said that. Like, it's just, define where your edges are. You're going to say that that if this basket has to shift at all, it's going to be smaller and away from that top. I don't want to expand up. And so that's a really good way of saying, okay, there may be some problem solving, but I can put it into a parameter that the problem solve is in this direction rather than that direction. And I could work to make that happen. So alternatively, I could have had a much more, you know, detailed, polished start. I could have worked out every little drawing kink. I kind of like the idea that I'm going to be making some decisions as I go. It's part of the sort of thrill for painting of mine. I don't think going out on the deep end is a good idea, just like randomly throwing things around and hoping for the best. But these are guesses based on, you know, the real things that I see when I squint. It's just a matter of like, how resolved do they have to be before I go to that next step? Because in my opinion, we can work out a lot simply by seeing more, right? Rather than feeling like any one thing has to be perfect. So these are very simplified. I mean, I'll show you the still life again sometime soon. These shells are super complicated. They've got all kinds of busy little stripes and ridges and spikes. This urchin shell has just a ton of little stripes and dots on top of the stripes. But do I see those stripes when I squint? Maybe one or two, but that's minor, and I'm going to ignore that. So right now I've got a relationship of shell to basket, and I'm going to just take guesses and keep moving. And so like this is too dark, fine, right? And I just cut into the edge of my basket, but that's okay too, because I want to round this out a little bit more. So there's a little reflected light in here. I would rather err on the side of dark than on the side of light for everything except for highlight. And even in the highlights, I don't want to key up to pure white except for the extreme bright lights. I don't want every light to be white. Every highlight to be white. So I would rather key my midtones just a little on the dark side because there's not enough information to truly get them right. It's going to be mostly close, right? Close and adjustable. So let's just say I'm thrilled with that color. I actually am. Wow, look at that. I usually am not on the first iteration, but let's say I'm thrilled with this color. You know, I'd be surprised if by the time I block everything else in, that I'll feel like it's right. So there's some adjustments to do, but also too is like I don't want to feel like it has to be completely right. I just want to say that if I had to pick between being too light or too dark, I'd rather pick too dark, and then I can elevate highlight out of it. Now, there are much brighter elements than this, so this might very well be keyed up too bright. So right now I'm going to work wet into wet. I'm going to get a little bit of a transition here. I don't have to finesse the edges perfectly yet. I just have to do it before they dry. So if I was an acrylic, now would be a great time to finesse those edges because, you know, let's just even say if I get it wrong, I don't want a rigid paint defining the edge of the shadow. And working wet into wet is going to give me my soft edge and knock back any ridges of paint. But you know, it dries so fast that you only get that little window to work wet into wet. So I'm working in counter directions. This does have a natural direction to it because it all splays from that center part out, but I'm not worried about directional lines yet. I'm just worried about masses. So that's a fine place to stop. That's about what I see when I squint. And by the time I block all this stuff in, I will definitely bring the camera back. You'll see the image. So far, I've only used 2 brushes. I don't think that's a rule. I think you just want to use the amount of brushes that you're comfortable with. If you wanted to use a new brush for every new shape, you know, go for it. I tend to just you know, over a long period of time, I've developed brush control, which is more to say, like, I'd rather just apply paint on top and leave it and then go back for more paint, which allows me to not really have to shift my brushes anytime I want to change color. And I have gotten very used to the idea of not painting with solvent, just because the company that I would keep while I was painting couldn't be around solvent. So I'm going to, I just got used to not using it, which made me really sort of master layering paint. The feel of this paint running out on the brush, and then it'll start to make a mixture with whatever's there. I can do that on purpose, or I can just really intend not to and not make muddy colors. Or the idea that if I want something bold and to sit on the top, it's going to be a thickness of paint that's more so than the previous layer, and then I'll go back to the palette for more paint. And so that takes a little bit of a feel, but for me, it really helps with the problem solving. So I took that brush stroke too far, and now look, I'll just carve it away because I know I'm thicker than that previous layer. So it looks pretty bright, but it's not quite bright yet. Some of these edges aren't fully resolved, and that's okay. Like if I was going to do a small example of some of these little like triangular wedges, they have a sparkly highlight on them, but they're not terribly bright. They're just a little shinier than that inside part, which shells sometimes the inside is radically different than the outside. So I would say that's not too uncommon. But I doubt I'll get into fine detail on this sitting. It's going to be mostly about this big shaped block-in. All right. All right, so moving forward, when I squint, there's a gray turning value, but it's cool, but it's not cold. Maybe a tiny bit darker than that. So you'll see that little tester, that little taste of what is going to go down. And I always like to treat that as it's probably wrong. And so I just put a little dot down, and you know, what does it need? Is it lighter, darker, warmer, or cooler? Now there is a little intricate web of reflected lights in here that I could do directly. I'm going to ignore those for now because they disappear when I squint. So I'm really only going for squint level right now. And squinting, you know, it's not a radical idea. I mean, I don't think too many instructors will start people without telling them to squint. That's a very common thing. The challenge of it is to stick with the squint level until it's right. And then some people just say, you know, it's just a small stage and that you only do it in the beginning. You don't compare it to your subject. I think it's something that you want to check at all times. Like, you know, that squinting, you know, the reason you saw those shapes when you squint is because they're really there, and they really ought to be there from start to finish. So if I start with the squint level shapes, then I know they ought to be there at the very end. So I just came across something that, again, I told you I'd be problem solving this whole time. I think maybe they shifted a little bit between last sitting and this, or maybe I just blocked it in wrong. But I don't see nearly this much of this little projection. And that's just a little problem solve. So I wanted to increase this negative shape. Again, I'm thinking very abstractly right now. And so I cut into the border of light and shadow up here. which might have me pushing this back, and that's okay because everything's tentative right now. But also too, you know, it's cutting this, it could be shorter or it could be relatively shorter if I raise this. And I think it's just a little bit of both. And so maybe later I'll solidify some edges. Maybe I'll even do a little blending. I usually don't like blending. It just depends on how long I want to spend on this. Blending for me is, I don't know, a little unpredictable, a little less intentional. And so I don't like to leave it in blending. But let's just say at the end of the sitting, I don't want to do any finessing one edge into the other with brush strokes because that'll take some time. What if I just want to be done for the day? Then yeah, I might consider it. But it's good to have all these techniques in your sort of box of tricks. That way you can use them when you need them and don't use them if you don't need them. So there's some things I like to do more than others, and blending is not one of them. I just like to work wet paint into wet paint. Okay, so slight drawing modifications as I go. I don't feel like I have to perfect anything. Again, my system is to guess on the side of dark. If I was going to guess and it's going to be wrong in either direction, it's going to be too dark, hopefully. You know, I just would rather guess dark than guess light. And so this really simple underpainting for this super complex painting, I'm quite willing to cut into these shapes if I need to. And I am. So again, it's always referring back to what I see when I squint my eyes. I'm painting rather thin right now, maybe even a little thinner than I normally go. This, the nature of this being abstract may not look like anything for a while. I know what these shapes represent because I'm doing them. And when you're doing your block-ins, there's probably I mean, if you're doing it the way I like to do it, there's an abstract quality that may not look like the finished product yet. And you just have to understand that you're not painting the finished product, you're painting the squint level. And so just, you know, don't feel like it has to be perfect too soon. In fact, I'm going to be making a lot of adjustments as I go from simple to specific. There are parts of this shell that are very bright. But again, I'm not worried about specificity yet. I'm worried about simple blocking. Okay, so those are some squint level shapes. I could keep working on them, but I would rather just keep moving because again, there's just no need to perfect anything yet. I just see a little ridge here that's a little bit brighter, and I'll use that as a spacer. So I think this will work. And the I think part is going to be based on other compositional spaces. This is going to be a super hard edge, but I figured I would work the values around it and then put this back on top. And I don't feel like it's ready for absolute detail, so I'm just going to keep moving. I'm not going to do a detailed edge just yet, because I'd rather base the background off of the shell, but I'd rather not have to carefully avoid the edges of the shell. So I'm just going to put a tentative edge of these shapes in place and paint the background right into the edge, and then paint that edge back over, hopefully with just a little bit of specificity. Again, I'm gonna gauge it based on how much time, you know, where is this at the end of, say, like 8, or I say like 11:30. I didn't mean to say 8. Then we'd be over. I don't think so. Again, out of context, this looks a little on the dark gray side, these sort of mauve colors, but we're way out of context. And so, yes, it may be true that they're a little dark or gray. I doubt it. I think they're probably going to end up being too bright, but we'll see, because I'm not ready for that level of specificity yet. I'm going to keep gaining information by jumping around the composition and building based on best guesses at best. They're not going to be anything that I'm going to hold as true or accurate, or, you know, something that I'll have to protect. I don't want to protect any of these shapes. I want to, you know, make decisions, but also, you know, again, if I'm going to make a mistake, they're going to be too dark. So, I'm just not worried about a thing yet. I normally don't even do an underpainting. Now, one thing that I did miss while I was doing my underpainting is just a quick thumbnail sketch, which I have no excuse why I didn't do it. It wasn't to show off or be lazy. I just don't know why I didn't do it. But that would have really helped me see the design of the rectangle first. This is an 18 by 20. Looks bigger than that. I don't know. I'll have to test that against the frame. That looks at least 2 feet. Maybe I cut it wrong. Anyway, I was cutting it for a frame, but I make mistakes. So if I have to get a new frame for it, it won't be the end of the world. Okay. Hey, Liz.
Hi, Hans.
How are you?
I'm fine. Oh, wow. Look how much you've done.
I'm just getting started.
It's beautiful.
I was just telling them, you know, I think there's still people watching. 4 people watching. Awesome. That I'm ignoring the slats, even though there's a really nice pattern of shells going through this. I'm just keeping it about squint level, and then ignoring the really small stuff. So again, the slats, the little ripples through here, the textures. I said it won't be long until I, you know, show the still life again. I'll just pick up the cameras and go there.
Yeah, that's fine for me because I have a picture of it already.
You have the still life set up?
Yeah, I took a picture of the one that you had from your first Instagram announcement.
Gotcha. With the
Yeah,
with the
so-
words over it and stuff. I mean, not over the image, but like advertising the feed.
Yeah, advertising the session, and I cropped it so that I could see the setup. So it may not be exactly the way that you're looking at it, but
It'll probably be pretty close if it came from that photo I took. I probably took it from this seat. I mean, I can't know for sure until I look at it, but.
Yeah, but at least I know what you're painting, and I like seeing that.
Yeah, I mean, some of this is even a little bit busier than I should feel like I have to go. I mean, it's not anything that I'd want to undo. I just don't want to get too picky too early.
No, I understand.
For the reason of just not protecting anything. You've heard that one a million times, but I mean, sometimes some of these best practices, like I'm looking at a really, really complicated still life. So it's really easy to sort of forget the things that are so ironclad in the way you paint, just dealing with something that's really tough. I mean, I have a feeling I'm going to be disciplined enough to follow my own protocol, and I've been at this for a very, very long time. But I mean, at painting in general, not this painting, but I've painted some pretty complicated still lifes. Between I use this same shell for a really tricky lace tablecloth painting. And
yeah, that is a really cool looking shell.
Yeah, this is the second time I'm painting it. It's a tough one. It's got little craggy things all over it, but I'm not beholden to it being exact. I just wanted to have that system because I don't know shells well enough to know what I can get away with.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I've done this long enough that I know that I can do the problem solve when I need to by the end, right? I know the little things that I need to do to make the adjustments. So I don't know. I'm not worried about this sitting. And having said that, I really like it so far. I like how this sitting is going so far.
Did you add background today? No.
No, not yet. I like to have. I went darker with the background, but I think I'm still going to go even darker. That was at the end of the underpainting.
Yeah.
And it was just a matter of how much time I wanted to spend doing that. So I didn't really want to spend forever making the background dark enough because I just paint over this stuff anyway. I don't like getting too specific with underpainting more than what I see when I squint. And I'm even blocking this color sitting in what I see when I squint. I'm not getting specific for quite a while. I'm going to break this down into 5 values of light, a highlight, those glancing lights, turning shadow, reflected light, cast shadow. And then it's a matter of all those little edges and things like that. And then all the little surface details. Because like this shell right here has all these little brown stripes that look so neat. I'm just not nearly ready for them.
Right.
I'm not painting to my edges because I decided early on that even though I like the underpainting, I made the decision to cut into the outlines instead of to paint out to the outlines.
Okay.
And that is, generally speaking, saying that I'd rather shrink rather than grow.
Okay.
And so all that's very, very intentional. It's hard to think about all that stuff, until you've done it so many times that it just becomes a little automatic. Like those little nuance, those little quirks, those aren't best practices. Those are just little quirky things that I do as an artist. I mean, then the next person painting a still life might do it a completely different way. It's just really great considering that. I mean, I don't force students to paint like me. Well, maybe you'll disagree with that.
No, I don't disagree. Or do I agree? I don't know what I'm saying.
You're like, liar!
No, I wish I could paint like you.
Well,
Put
again,
it that way.
okay, well, that's nice. But that's not that, you know, as long as we can get to the same fundamentals at the end product, you know, we were going to create the illusion of three-dimensional depth
Yeah.
with a nice style, and your style could be totally different from mine. And that's totally, you know, not only cool, but encouraged, right? That's
right. You want to encourage individuality.
Well, I've been to a lot of workshops to where I felt like, you know, I'm really stretching to try to paint like this other artist, and it's just not natural for me. And it's cool to learn other techniques. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, I don't know. There's a natural way I see and depict in a style that I'm going for that I don't want to force to paint like somebody else, you know, over a style that just doesn't work for me, even though it might work for this other person. You know? Like, not painting with solvent is radically different than 90% of artists.
Yeah.
But again, it's just I got used to not doing it, so I don't use it. Right.
While I'm thinking of it, I don't know if you need to or want to, but did you want to record those?
Oh, darn. Yes, I do.
Okay.
For some reason, I have some meetings that automatically record and some that don't. Good call.
Okay.
Where's record? It's not in the menu.
Let me see. It should be in your menu.
No, it's different on the laptop.
Recording in progress.
There it is.
Okay. Yep.
Darn. Okay, well, at least I have it on YouTube.
Right.
I remember I said I was going to give up on YouTube because of all the video problems. If you're on YouTube, I almost every time I have trouble with the videos. So it might cut out and then look for me again because I'll start it up again. Pain. Big pain. Oh well. So
this is such a treat for me.
yeah. Well, thank you. Glad you like it. Well, it's nice for me. First off, I really like having people around to chit chat about art and talk to and stuff. And maybe I got to find a way to let YouTubers chime in too. But also too, it kind of forces me down here because if I didn't put on that notification, then I don't know. There's probably like 30 other things I could be doing right now.
Sure. Yeah.
No, I have a feeling that this shell will get a lot more dramatic as soon as I go darker with the background. But again, I'd rather make the background second fiddle to the shells and just kind of envision what it would look like rather than being kind of trapped into a values box of the background. So I'd rather the background be subservient to the subject rather than the vice versa. It's not like any of these decisions are permanent. It's just the way I like to work. And I know many artists that would get a stronger estimation of the background earlier than I do. Again, I have no criticisms for other people's techniques other than if I look at it and say, okay, that system is creating muddy paint, or this is very inefficient, or you know, those are little things that, you know, maybe I'd keep to myself if I was watching somebody. But maybe not always. Maybe not always keeping it to myself. What's that, Liz?
I was gonna say, have you tried your new brushes yet?
Those little detail brushes are the ones you gave me.
No, the ones I gave you.
Yeah, no. This is one of them. Yeah.
Do you like it?
Silver, extra long filbert. Yeah. I mean, look at it. I mean, that's the only reason that basket looks good.
That's not the only reason. Let's be real about that.
No, it's the brush. It's the brush.
Yeah, right.
That's like the reverse. Like, you know, people like, oh man, I'd have painted it better if not for these terrible brushes. It's like, the only reason it looks good is because of these brushes. Forgot a section. Having said that, there you go. There's your brush in action.
Okay.
I'm going to use another one for the big background.
Okay.
I am making the decision for now not to do the cast shadows on the wall because they're not very attractive. They're kind of distracting. So I don't know.
Plus, if you're going to change the background anyway.
Yeah. Well,
might as well wait.
Well, but I'm already suggesting that you know, I'm making decisions because, you know, I have a plan, but it's incomplete until I see what the painting is doing. And that's a little different than some people who want to have a perfect sketch to trace and transfer and then have a color study on the side and they're going to follow that. And they already have all their decisions made and they're going to follow that to a T. I respect that too. It's just not the way I like to paint. You know, I'm not going to argue with anybody that gets good results. It's just, I don't know. I kind of like to have that dialogue with the painting, especially alla prima. And this is definitely not going to be an alla prima. Well, it's already not an alla prima, but I love doing alla prima, but that can have not only its own voice, but a strong voice. It's like, you better change course and do it a different way. If you're going to fit.
I like that you say, you know, to have a dialogue with a painting because it's, you know, it's more interesting when you say that because it's like the painting is interacting with you, and it is.
It totally is. Totally is. It, you know, I have a good sense of where this is going, but I'm constantly making decisions based on, you know, these relationships that are forming in the painting. And if I just say, okay, I need to go darker because of this, or now this new area is really super cool, so I'm going to play this up and play this down, right? Those are all because I'm seeing something and reacting to it. And so, like, I'd be, you know, I'd be slowing it way down if I had to have everything figured out ahead of time. But it's not like I'm going in this blind. I have a plan. It's just I'm not so wed to it that I can't, you know, be inspired by something that's happening on the painting that I didn't anticipate. So if that sounds a little schizophrenic, I'm okay with that. He's talking to his painting. What a weirdo.
I don't think that at all.
All right, I'm definitely not going to develop all these little spikes. I just wanted to see this relationship. This looks bright, but it's not compared to these areas. And I'm already kind of flirting with keyed up a little high. It may not look like it yet, because all these little gray purples and browns are maybe looking a little dark right now. But when I go darker with that background, that's going to be really bright. And my brightest light, yeah, it might be in some of those, but I think the iridescent shells are going to be even brighter. So I want to be really careful with pure white. I haven't used any yet. You know, but I might still be a little keyed high, which I won't know for a little while.
So with your iridescent shells, are you going to be, I think I asked you this before, but I couldn't remember the answer. Are you going to be using glazes for that?
Yeah, definitely. My strategy for that is definitely glazes. But I have to decide what kind of glaze. Do I play up these colors too dark and too vivid on this setting in half paste? Or do I paint them pale or even missing on this sitting and paint it too bright, and then glaze them on top of the brightness and having the brightness come through those colors?
Yeah.
I'm opting for the first option because they're kind of milky, and a half paste will do that for me. They're kind of milky, and I'd rather key it a little bit on the dark side anyway, because these highlights are super bright. And who knows if that strategy would be right or wrong, because I'm fully aware that I'm going to be doing some problem solving. There's going to be some surprises, for sure. Fully expecting that. It doesn't always make it comfortable, even if you are expecting it, but yeah, there's going to be problem solving. There's no way I'm going to guess right on every tiny little relationship in here, and iridescence is particularly difficult to do in oil paint. Well, I mean, with any media. At the end of the day, it's just colors and values and, relationships to other things. So when you say it like that, it sounds like it's easy, but it's really not.
No, I'm looking at that show right now.
Yeah, I ought to show the viewers on YouTube what I'm talking about.
It has so many colors.
Yeah, I'll do that right now. Okay. I should take a break anyway. Small break. So, wow. Oh no, did I lose them? Did I lose them? I didn't lose them, did I? Did I lose them? I hope not.
I'm going to mute myself and I'll check for you.
Okay. No, I'm good. I'm good. Good. All right. I'm sorry about the bumpy camera. I thought I lost you. The last few times I've done YouTube videos, if I so much as bump the camera, I lose the whole feed and then I can't get it back. And I'm sure more YouTube savvy people could tell me what I'm doing wrong, but I haven't figured it out yet. Hey, here's the setup. And again, my strategy is to paint all these sort of swirly greens and pinks, maybe a little dark. And oh, hi, both of you. Sandra and B.A. Okay. Well, hi, both of you. Thank you for joining me. So I'm going to paint those a little on the dark side. They're going to be uncomfortably dark for a little while. And I'm going to let them stay like that to dry. And then what a half paste is an opaque glaze. Did I just do it again? Here we go. So when you glaze with opaque paints, it will kill the contrast. It'll mute the colors. It'll make them hazy, and it'll make the transition smoother. And those are all really good qualities for painting this shell, because there's kind of a milkiness to it. It's not high contrast, except for the bright highlights and the dark that happens on the turn. But, in my head, it works perfectly, and then I'll do it for real and then have to react to it. So I have a feeling it's going to get me close, but not there. And then I'll adjust and react and change things up. And I have a confidence I'll pull it off eventually. It may not go super smooth. We'll see. And it's all relative. If I already am resigned to the idea that this is very complex, then super smooth might be, 4 rounds of adjustment. And then I have to just be okay with that. It's all relative. If this were eggshells, I've painted them a million times. They're not as complicated as iridescence or all these craggy textures. Complex, I don't know. That's I wouldn't consider that particularly complex. So if I didn't do a good job painting that in, yeah, that might be a little bit more frustrating than taking a couple guesses at this and not getting it right the first couple times. But I don't know. I think that's a really unhealthy way to think about it, is saying like you always have to get it right every time. When you're doing a live demonstration to people that you some of which I don't really know all that well. I mean, I know you, Liz, but some of the people watching, I know kind of, or not really at all. So, so you always want to do a good job, but if you let that kill the way you paint, or you get so nervous about it, you do a bad job. You didn't do yourself any favor. So, I don't know. I just like to play the game here. It's going to be tough. I'm going to problem solve. I've got a lot of different tools for doing problem solving. I know my color theory. I know my light. I know my perspective. Easy to forget those things while you're painting. So I'm keeping my eye out for abstraction and problem solving. I'm going to keep going back to squinting for a very long, till the very end of the painting, because those squint level shapes ought to be there at the end. They just get more complicated. So if you're squinting at all your details and it doesn't disappear the way that you see when you squint, well, it's not really working value-wise. There's some things that you can enhance, and even sometimes you can get away with it being in the wrong category of light. Depends on the painting, I guess. But most of the time, if it's supposed to be in the light and it starts flirting with the dark values, you could be getting yourself in trouble. So same thing with the darks, and if they start getting into that light range of values, you can be getting yourself in a lot of trouble. Small moments might work, but then the big moments don't. And it's the big moments that matter. It's not the tiny details that are going to make or break this painting. Even though it's a highly detailed painting, highly textured painting, at the end product, that might be the defining feature of this painting, that it has all these little things, these little details. But if it doesn't work on the big shapes in that squint level, you won't be able to appreciate the details. So this painting is really all about this stage and making that right. And then all the little decisions that I make from here on out are going to be to preserve this squinting shape. And so I'm creating categories of these little pockets of squint level shapes that now I know that if it starts getting outside of that squint level, if it doesn't properly disappear into that squint or endure the squint, then I know I got outside of its bounds, and I've just created confusion for the viewer who will never see this setup. And that's the temptation. The temptation is to only paint this little section, and then only paint this next little section, and then you might find later that if there's a disharmony, that's because it got outside of that squint level. And then I'm going to categorize this further by 5 values of turning form. So if we think about the ball, we've got highlights, and that's that little moment where the ball is not facing the light. All right, I'm sorry. Yeah, we have highlights where it's facing like perfectly to the light. It's glancing really strongly because it's in that angle accordingly to the light source. And then everything else is glancing while it's still in the light. And then there's a moment where it turned away from the light source and now it's in a turning shadow. Then environmental light can bounce into the reflected light or secondary light sources that are weaker than the primary. And that's in its own category. And then finally, we've got cast shadow, which is blocking the light. And that has its own properties as well. So I know that all my decision making can be made in those 5 categories within this shell, and then 5 categories within this shell with the same color, direction, and intensity of the light coming down this way for every object in this painting. And that's where going to be not only what I see when I squint, but it's also going to be in the problem solve of saying, okay, why doesn't this work? And it's going to be because it's gotten outside of its bounds of what those 5 values ought to be doing with this light source. And so none of that makes it easy, but it makes it more understandable, and it helps you to problem solve because you know how to diagnose the problem. So that's where this stage is. I'm really trying not to be too nitpicky because these shapes are bonkers, and I know that I'll get them probably more accurate when I can just keep moving on, and then I'll get back to it maybe later in this sitting, or even wait, let it dry, and then come in here with paint on a dry surface, which is really easy to get these little detail notes and these little sharp edges. The reason that I'm able to get a fine line here on wet paint is because of paint handling. I know how much paint that I need on the tip of the brush to make a brush stroke on top of this wet paint mass. And that takes a lot of feel, right? And so feel is something that will have to develop over time, because it's just, you know, you can't learn that in a book. You know, you can get a quality teacher tell you that, you know, you have to use less paint or more paint, or, you know, maybe work an edge more and things like that. But to know what it feels like to put the right amount of paint down, that takes a familiarity that you just have to earn over time. You're not going to be able to book learn that, at least not in my opinion. And so there's no shortcut to feeling the amount of paint to put down to make a good layer on top of wet paint. That's why a lot of students will get to a point where they just say, I can't go any further because I'm swimming in paint. Well, I usually don't get to that point. That's why I can take my alla primas very far, because I just know, you know, I need to keep going thicker or remove a paint layer, which I rarely take away a paint layer, but it happens from time to time. And then, you know, then it's just a matter of problem solving. You know, you put a paint down and it doesn't work. Well, then you can properly diagnose it by those 5 values. And by, you know, like if I put a brush stroke down, I can ask myself, is it too light, too dark, too warm, too cool? Is it, you know, the correct hue for this painting, or, you know, is it just not working, right? And so we're going to be able to take quick decisions based on familiarity. I feel like we'll make the best decisions if this whole painting is in context. So I better not get too nitpicky, or I'm already starting to get a little nitpicky. With all these little complicated shapes, I could just keep them really simple. I just want to make sure that this ridge in particular fits. And I've already had to move it just a little bit. You might not see the things that I'm shifting. And it doesn't get dark enough in some area. It doesn't have warm enough ridges in others. And I'm not going to worry about that yet. I'm going to worry about that much later. Well, I'm not going to worry at all. I mean, again, the painting is going to develop over time. It's just going to get there when it gets there. I just want to get there in an efficient way if I can. And by efficient, all I just mean is that as best possible, I want to work from simple to specific by continually moving forward and elaborating. It's completely unrealistic to feel like that's going to be perfect, but that's the goal. So if I can get these squint level shapes pretty good, then I know the next round of decision making is going to make it even better with more rendered details, all these little spiky things. I can stand back from it and see if the entire system works. I can see if what needs to stand out stands out. That's just a contrast problem. I can see if something is standing out too much and being a distraction, which is also a contrast problem. And so what I mean by that is, if something stands out too much, you already know that the decision making is going to be to reduce the contrast. If something's distracting you from where you want the eye to go, you have to reduce the contrast. If something that you want to elevate and pop out is not, you know you have to increase the contrast. Now, contrast is so multifaceted, you know, your primary one being light and dark, but it's not the only one. You're also going to but you're also going to think about, you know, texture versus smooth. This painting has a ton of textures. If I had too much everywhere, it's going to be hard to even see which textures are worth looking at. But also too is rich colors and dull colors, thick paint and thin paint. I might play up some details and subdue some details, just because I don't want detail everywhere. I want it to be relative and really bring out certain areas and simplify others. And so warm and cool colors are good contrasts. Intensity of color. If I keep my rich colors in an intentional place to bring the eye to and reduce the other colors, then I've created contrast. And so most problem solving from this simple blocking is going to be in terms of contrast, and then some drawing and proportional corrections, because I did not measure very much. I mentioned in the video, I don't know if anybody was watching yet, but I did mention in the early stages that I think it was a little bit of a mistake to not do a little thumbnail sketch, a little quick doodle to make sure that everything fit the right way. So I don't think it's a problem in the way things fit. It's a little tight up there, but I don't really want to reduce the sizes of anything except for cutting into the outlines. And I would have gotten to that proportion a lot faster if I had a little doodle on graph paper and just made sure that this proportion has the stuff occupying it with good negative shapes. And so again, I'm very conscious when I make a mistake, and I'm happy to share it with people, because I like to just say this stuff is complicated. It's hard to think about every little best practice simultaneously. And even somebody who's been doing them for a long time, you're just going to fall short sometimes. You're going to say, oh, okay, I really should have done this thing that would have helped me, but I didn't. And now I'm just going to get through it. So hope that makes sense. Anyway, that shell's now completely blocked in from now. I'm going to revisit it later, probably. And now I want to look at this relationship of this shadow to this shell. Nothing is perfect. So if I have to then come back into here, fine, right? It's not set in stone. But there is quite a bit of refracted glow coming through this shell. It's not nearly that dark and not nearly that intense. So I put my words on what I didn't like about it. And too dark means I'm brightening. Too intense means I'm dulling. And so I'm just doing the opposite of how I articulated it. And so articulation, I think, is wonderful. I think it's just a really great way to find the problem solve. Just put your words on it. I mean, it seems so simple and it seems kind of like a duh thing, but I really think that a lot of students need to be reminded of that. Or not even students, sometimes even, really seasoned professionals. Like, you can't put your words on the problem. You're just probably going to just fish around at just random, problem solves. And, that's inefficient. You might still get to a good end product, but you'd be fishing for those corrections and slowing down the ability to get to one that works. Just put your words on it. Just say, this is to ... But what you don't want to do is attach your ego to it. You don't want to condemn yourself. You don't want to say, oh, stupid, I made a mistake. It's part of the process. So you're not saying good or bad. You're just saying what's the property that's off. So if I'm saying, well, that brush stroke right there, not on purpose, but that one right there is way too dark. Fine, right? I don't have to think I'm a bad artist right now. Just have to make it a little bit lighter. And so I think that's the that's one of the hardest parts about painting, especially while you're trying to create beautiful artwork and you're at the early stages. It's really easy to say, oh, I'm doing such a bad job, or I'm a bad artist, or why can't I do this? It's just not helpful. Right now, we're just putting in shapes and reacting to whatever whatever property we can assign that we'd like it to be better by. And so I've just done a few little simple adjustments to make it a little closer to what I want. I'm comparing this value to that. So these darks here are darker than this urchin, but this has to be lighter than that urchin. So I'm starting to get into an inflection point to where I got to be careful not to make this too bright. It shouldn't compete with this, but it should be darker than this. So instead of trying to make this too bright, I might even just consider the possibility that that has to get darker. Like I said, I'm probably going to revisit a lot of these things once I get more information. So I don't want to feel like I'm perfecting any one thing. If I go darker here, that'll look brighter. And that'll look brighter. So I don't really have to do this correction yet. I just have to see it in my mind's eye, but I just wanted to show it anyway. All right, so I did mention very early on, I don't know if anybody was watching yet, that I'm painting a little thin, a little bit on the thin side of paint. I'm going to try to cover ground. I'm not using really much medium at all, but trying to keep it a little on the thin side, just so I don't have any weird textures coming through. Because all these little nuancy things, if I have a weird texture in there and I don't want to sand it, because I don't really like sanding all that much, then I might want to err on the side of thinner paint and not leave ridges on the edges of the brushstroke. Now, anybody that knows my work knows I like to paint thick, especially in the lights. It's just not the time for it. Okay, so I want to just play with a highlight. There's a little sparkly highlight here that I want to be able to make show up. Is that enough? Maybe. I'm going to darken it anyway. Which, if I darken this, oh, that's way too much. If I darken this, then I might still have to darken that. And again, it's not to be right or wrong, it's just to react one thing to the other. And let's pull the urchin back. Yeah, I think that'll work. And then we'll just make this a little darker. I'll redraw my edge with this dark plane. Is that too much like the urchin? Yes-ish. Yes-ish.
I agree.
All right, so urchin's getting darker and warmer. That's going to get lighter and cooler without competing with this, hopefully. Whoa, way too bright. All right, okay, so I'm just going to cool down this inside part. I'm going to keep it about the same value, but I'm not going to worry about perfecting it. It's just going to get kind of close. First try didn't work. Second try, maybe. And I'll get my more precise brush for this edge. So I gave it a little outline, but now I'm working it into the mass. Don't really like a too hard of an edge there because it's round, but it is nice to show that it's a plane change on top of that idea. Now this goes out too wide. I see it all. I saw it really early, but I didn't do anything about it, and that's because I don't have the background in yet. So I'm going to trim that edge with the background and then reestablish a little bit of an outline. And that outline will be nice. This might end up being, because these plane changes are so stark, I might just outline a lot of these, which would kind of be cool. Not heavy outlines, but I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm just talking to the painting and seeing what it needs. I think those edges would be really nice. What I'm a little worried about with that idea, though, is that I want the basket to have those little edges for the weave. So not too sharp of an edge, but maybe just a little tiny bit of an outline, like almost like those Bouguereau paintings, where they have that just faintest of faint back outlines around like the figures. Really nice. They still look realistic, but they just have that little bit of a crispness to them. I'm not going to bother with that edge, again, because I don't want to avoid it when I do the background, and I want to be conscious of that. And so this shell is far from perfect, but it does distinguish at least a little bit from the urchin, and it's dark enough for the highlight. So I'm checking a lot of boxes. I'm comparing it. It's brighter than the basket, probably not by enough. We'll see. So if I have to darken the basket, that's going to be easy. I'll just glaze it and then push highlights out of it. I don't really even have any highlights yet. So this was the place I was starting, and that's probably going to be the least defined area. So I'm going to just, as an experiment, I'm just going to mix a little bit of this background in. I need to get more medium, or as I explained before, the medium is just black oil. And the reason I was able to hold my palette up right then is because I ran out of black oil. Otherwise, it would just drip down the page, or palette. But I'm going to be covering a lot of ground. So I'm going to be using a little bit of oil for that. A lot of people just use solvent. I don't. So again, I'm not in the business of judging anybody else's techniques or procedures. I can certainly explain mine. But that goes without judgment. That's not meant to say that, you know, anything that I'm doing is superior to anybody else's. It's just, I don't know, I paint the way I paint. All right, so I'm going to I like the greenishness of the background, so I'm going to keep a little bit of the green. I've used some black and white, and I'm going to use a value that makes, that's going to be spectacular. I normally don't think I'm going to get it right on the first try. But this is what I was talking about with these edges. These edges are super complicated, but I already said that I want to cut into the outline to lose the outline rather than paint the shell out to lose the outline. That's going to make it a tiny, tiny bit smaller. And I just don't have a lot of room to play with the top of the composition. So I better cut rather than add. And I'm just going to use the background as a, stop here, but I'm going to cut into the shell just a little. If I lose the edge, fine, I'll just redraw it a little bit. I'd rather do that than leave a little edge of this sort of mid-tone green. But look how much brighter it's making my shells. So again, a lot of people would have already established the background. I waited because I wanted to make sure that the background is subservient to the shells rather than the shells subservient to the background. I'm going to cut this shape off just a little bit better. And I'll decide later if I want to leave an edge, but I don't like that. That's a ridge. So just watch out for the ridges. The ridges, it's not the end of the world, but I don't want to compete with those in the raking light when the painting gets displayed in like a gallery or something. Those little ridges might catch light and be distracting. Plus, it makes it a little harder to put delicate brushstrokes on top of. Not by much. It's not anything that you wouldn't be able to handle, but it's, again, it's a game of little tiny adjustments. So right here, I see the shell shadow as a tiny bit lighter than the background. So I might want to darken that just a touch. Again, just thinking about ways of adapting the background to the subject. Yeah, and I'll just redraw all this. No big deal. Great big brush. Great big filbert. This is another one of those brushes, Liz.
Yeah, I like the way they work.
Yeah. Yeah, much better. Much. I'm going to go a little bit darker, a little bit greener, a little bit browner for...
Wow, that really makes it pop.
Yeah, real nice. There is a cast shadow. I have shelves that I can adjust. They're actually getting a little worse for wear. I might have to replace them sometime soon, but I can take them off the track and raise them or lower them. Right now up there's a shelf that I have some still life props on. Oh, and a can of silver polish, but it's casting this big shadow back here. It's making it really dark, and I like it. It's just bringing a lot of attention to that handle. So if I used any of that, it would be more to fade rather than this big cast shadow like I see. But I kind of like this relationship of this glow in here against a rich dark. So I'm going to be shifting from this value to a darker value up here. Just want to do it subtly. So if I'm going to get to here, I need to start darkening this to get there. I'm just thinking about these little things. It's not that I have to get it perfect. I can do another layer on the background, but again, I'm letting the painting speak to me just a little bit so I can make creative decisions. But I might even take another creative direction after everything else gets blocked in. So I'm just definitely not thinking anything set in stone. Again, I'm cutting into shells to make to not carefully avoid these intricate edges. Okay, so now it's transitioning a little bit darker from this moment. And any jump in value I can address later or hit it with a blending brush. Like I said, I normally don't blend, but depends on how I want to finish the sitting. Blending will make it look a little smushy and weak, but it will bring it together without any ridges of paint, and it'll do it fast. And so if I really want to just be done, I'll hit it with a blending brush. If I want to do it the way I like, and that's just closing down any big jumps of value with a brush stroke, wet into wet, I'll do that. So that's to be determined. How's it look on the screen? It's looking pretty good on the screen. Yeah, I like the way it's going. Anyway. All right, so a little bit of redraw here. I might have to extend the handle just a tiny bit. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it without adding, but we'll see when I'm ready for detail. Or not even detail, but the next iteration. Yeah, good. Now, I might not complete this. One thing I definitely want to do is work the edges of the shell so I can make good decisions, especially when I maybe take a break and get away from the painting and then come back with fresh eyes. I might very well want to change some big shape relationships before I get into really intricate stuff. So if this would definitely not be an alla prima, but if it were an alla prima, I definitely want to get back from the work, see it with fresh eyes, and do some big relationship problem solving, not tiny intricate stuff. Again, I said earlier that I was going to cut into the shell. There it is. And then it barely distinguishes from the background what I see when I squint. So I'm going to try that and see if I need to elevate it past what I see. But I'm just not worried about losing an edge. I like this idea that the shell gets into the cast shadow of the basket and reads as a dark against light. So I have to modify how dark I'm going, because again, I don't want this cast shadow to be this big contrast dark edge up here, but I do like kind of how dark it gets as it, as it gets into that cast shadow. So I've got to make up my mind where the transition is and how fast. And I've already changed my mind once already, just simply because this tip of the shell gets into the cast shadow of the basket handle. And I like that it reads dark against light. So I lightened up some of this stuff, and I'll probably keep going darker. So maybe up here I'll get darker. And again, I had a plan, and now I'm modifying it slightly because the painting is saying something. Okay. So I just rework this edge just a little and maybe get to these iridescent shells. What time is it?
9:25.
9:25. So I've been painting for about an hour and a half.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, there's some of that iridescent glow. I think this made the drawing more like what I see. So that was an improvement. And then the redraw to make that little shift right there. And then I'm going to put a little outline. It's going to be a tiny bit on the thin side. I said thin, but it didn't go down very thin. I certainly don't do everything right. Okay. Does that work? It works enough for now. So I'm just going to keep moving forward. I'm going to put this glow in. The urchin shell has that opening, but it's kind of got a nice kind of warmth to it. I think it needs to be a little bit higher anyway. That warmth is too much. Oh, bother. All right, I'm going to make that darker. It looked okay on the palette. That's okay. Yeah, better. And all these little craggy edges. I'm not going to get too specific on this sitting. Just another thing to compare in the big network of all the other shapes. But I don't have all the other shapes yet, so again, I don't want to feel like I have to perfect anything. Too dark. All right, there we go. Okay, so most of those shells are blocked in. This is still a little too outliney for my taste, so I'm gonna just address that real quick. And even if I might have to redraw just a little, that's okay. Again, this isn't the stage for perfection. It's a stage for guesses and big connective things. Okay, cool. All these little stripes in here and stuff like that, I'll worry about that later. Just soften the edge real quick. Okay. I'm yet to establish a lightest light. I know plenty of artists that like to have that as like one of the first considerations. I would never call that a mistake, especially for the caliber of some of the artists that I'm thinking of. I just think that those are such special moments that I'd rather put them in context and get them right. So I usually don't put the really dark accents or the really bright accents, like that pure white highlight or that, red black accent dark. I like to do that a lot later. So until I get a good context, I don't want to feel like I have to place those perfectly because there's such special moments. So one artist that comes to mind is Scott Tallman Powers. I would never say that what he's doing is wrong because it's just too good. So again, there's a wide range of techniques that work. Now, I find this more mid-tone approach to be more accessible to beginners, especially than very, very direct painting. And that's just because I've been teaching for a long time. I've seen what helps students and where the struggle points are. But okay, cool. So yeah, I'm gonna put some of this iridescence in. I don't want to feel like I have to get it perfect, so I'm just gonna take some guesses at too dark and too rich. That's way too dark and way too rich. But I don't have to get it right. I have to get it right after, maybe a couple rounds of glazing and or half pasting and then glazing and all that stuff. So this is way too much color and it's way too dark. And I'm just kind of envisioning that if I put this film of light on top, it'll be less. And will I get it enough? I don't know. I'm not going to say yes to that for the first try. Hopefully by the second or third iteration, it'll be somewhat believable. This is way over the top. This hot pink is way too dark, way too rich. And I have to see it in my mind's eye what it'll look like when I can subdue it with practically just white or maybe a cream that I'll put on top. I'm going to paint through the highlights for now. Again, because I don't need it to look like the finished product yet. It's just going to be the setup. Maybe this could be a little bit more of a crimson right here, and maybe a little bit right here, there. This value right here, where the shadow is, that is really inherently dark and very warm, but not as pure color. I'm going to put a lot of brown into it. I'm going to err a little bit on the side of artificially dark, because what if I half paste over it? It'll lighten and make it paler and cooler. So I'm just trying to think of that next stage when, what do I want to change it by? Well, it's going to be some of these, you know, those metrics of, well, lighter, hazier, less intense, less contrast, softer edges. All that's going to happen almost automatically. But it'll require just a little bit of anticipation. Now, this is definitely a candidate for blending brush, for sure. So again, the same properties: too green, too dark, too intense, too rich. All these are good qualities to exaggerate for this sitting, to subdue on the next sitting. And so I'm going to put it in, and then I'm going to blend it, and then I'm going to add some of these sort of more transition values. This would be really difficult for beginners, right? Because it takes a lot of envisioning and knowing that you're going to have to do a lot of problem solving. When you don't have a whole lot of tools in the toolbox for problem solving, you could have the notion of, oh my gosh, this is dreadful, this is awful, and so, you know, I see it as not right, and I'm envisioning what it'll look like when I get to those next few sittings, and that's just so incredibly tough. But again, you go through these paintings so many times, and you just start believing in your problem solving, and you know, when you get through it, you know, a good, I don't know how many paintings I've painted, a lot. Then you just sort of believe that, you know, you're going to make the right decision later. You're hoping that the half paste will do what you're asking it to do, but even if it doesn't, you know, you're okay. And so that would take a leap of faith that I think beginners would struggle with. Not impossible, because we could do this a safer way without all these rich colored darks, or these are in the middle value range, but they look really dark for right now. But again, I probably wouldn't suggest this for painting number 1 through 100.
Wow.
I don't know. I mean, I could help anybody problem solve through this, but they would have to believe me when I say, no, that's looking fine for now. And that'd be, I believe you. But it's the for now part that would be hard to believe. Like, it's like, you know, this is going to look okay after this next step, when we subdue it and when we you know, then have to stand back and adjust until we get it right. Really tough. Now maybe not 100. 100's a little ambitious, but definitely not a beginner painting subject. All right, so I haven't done two more values that I really want to put in before I leave this as being off by the right ways, anticipating that half paste. And so I'm gonna bring some of it together with some brights. I am gonna put down the cursory value of that highlight, and by cursory, it's just gonna be little globs of paint that, or maybe just a little too thin. But there's some grays in here that I want to get, and I don't want to feel like I'm going to perfect it because there's so much to adjust after I can do that half paste, and it just depends on that so much that I'm going to leave it more unfinished than some of these. These are pretty unfinished. I want to tackle them when they're dry. Again, because they just don't have to be alla prima, but so I wonder how many sittings it's going to take to get this right. Hopefully not too many. A lot of anticipation. If I'm talking too much, chime in. Let's talk about whatever.
Well, I have been waiting for you to get to that shelf, so I'm excited.
Well,
about it.
I didn't want to go there too early because it's going to look really weird for right now.
Yeah, but that's okay because.
Well, but if I can make this look somewhat squint level believable, then you'll have a little bit more confidence I'll pull this off.
Well, I already know you can do it.
Well, yeah, you've been painting with me for a long time.
And I totally trust you.
Well, again, I just don't know how many rounds it'll take to get it somewhat close, but I don't anticipate it happening on the second sitting. I just imagine that getting a little closer, and I'm okay with that.
I have a question for you.
What's that?
So when you do the half paste, that's also a thin layer, right?
That's very thin. That's like an opaque glaze. Well, it is an opaque glaze. So it's going to be translucent. It's going to leave the painting coming through, but it's not going to be rich and dark like a glaze will do. It's going to be hazy and weak, and it's going to subdue all this stuff. It's going to bring the contrast together. And by how much? Well, I mean, it depends on the strength of the half paste, but also too, it's going to get me to a point where I can make the next round of problem solve. It's not. I don't think it's going to be perfect.
Now, will the half paste be one value, or will you do different half paste on different parts of the shell?
I could do different half paste, but
usually it's one value, right?
I wouldn't even say usually, but on this time it's probably going to be.
Okay.
Well, but again, it's try something and then adjust. So if I needed different half paste for different regions, it's okay. Yeah, I don't ever really like to assume that I'm going to make the right choice right off the bat. And so I had that little window when the painting is dry to do my glazes in half paste. And that's one of my favorite moments. So if I have to do 2 glazes, fine. If I have to do 3 half paste, fine. You know, I'll just keep going until I like what I'm doing. But the you know, the likelihood that I'm just going to put down a thin veil of, you know, off-white on top of this and it's going to be perfect, I highly doubt it. You know, okay, that's a little misleading too, because you know, we would lose the highlights with the half paste a little bit and then we'd put them back on and then readjust. But anyway, so these colors are way over the top. I'm just going to put in those highlight values and then just let it rest and dry, and then I'm just going to leave it awkward looking for a little while. But I think this is the right way. I think it's looking good for what I want for right now, and I think it's going to work. And I'm really confident that I'll figure out the next right thing to do based on what the half paste does. So I don't even need for that to be right to make the next right choice. So this is going to be this is going to be the second most incomplete area of the painting. The first most incomplete area of the painting is going to be under the lace tablecloth, because I am not going to be painting lace on this sitting. I'm going to make sure that what I want to read through all those little holes is going to be somewhat close, because I just want to be able to leave that behind. And again, it's just one of those things that I'm just going to anticipate, you know, what the lace is going to look like, what that value poking through all the holes is going to look like. And okay, so to round this sitting out, I'm going to put some highlights on. And that's going to be right here. These are going to be a little bit dark and a little bit colorful too, but they're going to stand out from this mass and get me just a little bit closer. That's a little bit too. That's better. Now I'm going to do a green highlight. I'm going to leave it a little on the rough side because I am going to blend, and I don't want to make it as thick as I want to go because I'm going to blend. If you have a really big globby impasto or something, don't blend. You're just going to pick it up and spread it everywhere. So trust me, I know. But I imagine anybody watching this with a mute and not hearing me explain that it's intentionally weird looking, they're gonna like, what's he doing?
Well, when we mute, we're just muting ourselves.
No, I mean like watching the video on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Or you know, I'm gonna dub it for you know, the sake of making a video.
I like the way that looks, Hans.
Yeah,
I do.
These incredible colors. Yeah.
Well, so, I like what you're doing right now. It's really lovely.
Thanks. There's little stripes in here. I'm ignoring the stripes. I don't want to go into that kind of detail yet.
It looks stripey. A
little bit.
Yeah, from where I see.
It's just because I took the brush stroke in the direction of the stripes. But it's not like a tiny detail brush making precision.
That little nub on the shell is just so pretty.
Which one?
The nub on the shell.
This one?
Yeah, it's really pretty.
Well, I appreciate hearing it. I didn't anticipate that.
I mean, I think, you know, your drawing it's so nice that
Well, I told you, I usually don't even do underpaintings. I'm glad I did, because this is very intricate and everything has to fit just right. I didn't get it right on the first couple tries. I only got it close enough to problem solve. But I like that. I don't like the pressure of everything has to be perfect. All right, so right here. Oops, that's too dark. Or wrong, too bright. Right, and then I'll plop some highlights in here, but again, they're going to be too dark and too colorful and only merely suggestive, because whatever I have paste on top, the highlights are going to get too dark. I'm sorry, they're going to get too washed out, and then I'll put bright highlights on top, but at least I'll have these edges of color to play with. The other thing too is that each new thing that I add gets me more information to make sure that things are aligned in a okay way. And I don't want it to put any kind of pressure more than just okay for right now. Just because I'm feeling my way through the whole composition, and I just don't feel like it's ready for more than just okay. I want to be able to squint at it, and I want to be able to, react all the big shapes together. If I had to make every shape perfect, I'd either have to carve out a lot of time for this sitting, or I just wouldn't get all that connective information. So even if I perfected one spot, I mean, will it be harmonious to the rest of the painting, or do I have to design the whole painting around that detail spot, which I don't like the idea of either. So I went all pink for these highlights. I need to add some green highlights too. I could just glob on pure white for that, and then half paste it, adjust, and then do it again. But
if you were to try to do the whole shell from beginning to end, would that be more of an impasto?
it's not a great subject for alla prima, if that's what you mean.
No, what I meant is, would that take, would you have to paint with thicker, paint?
I'd probably start a little on the thin side.
Okay.
And then work my way up to thick paint. I mean, that's typically how I do it anyway, because not that I'm afraid of thick paint. You've seen me do plenty of paintings that are pure palette knife paintings. Yeah. It's just that thick paint is another form of contrast. So if I am choosy where my thickest, big impastos are, then I can create a lot of visual contrast, because I'll have thin paint here and thick paint there, and if it's in a systematic way of saying, well, all the lights are going to be very thick paint and all the darks are going to be very thin paint, then that'll reinforce the illusion of depth.
Okay.
I mean, somewhat. Right? Again, we're talking about trying things and then adjusting, but that was one trick that my grandmother used. You can see it in Rubens' paintings, to where those thick impastos and thin wispy shadows, they make this huge impact. And you're talking about paintings that are, hundreds of years old, with all the limitations of those old masters, like, no artificial light, no cameras, no computers, no
right.
No refrigerators. So they definitely figured it out. If you can take those skills with the modern equipment, my goodness. All right, so here's another thing is I think that shadow is dark and warm enough to feel like there's a a light passing through the shell. Just doesn't look like it yet because this is too dark, but I know it's too dark. So again, it's just another one of those anticipatory things that I know this will feel lighter and more luminous when this gets brighter. I'm sorry, darker and more luminous when this gets darker. And the table is going to get very bright too. And that's going to make this seem, you know, really like a rich, bold shadow with all that light passing through the shell, projecting into the shadow. I think it's going to look great, but I have to just guess right now, just because I can't see it yet. And so I think I've taken this shell pretty far, and I'm just going to blend it. Take a soft brush and just, I'm going to work the thinner parts first in counter directions. I'm not going to leave any edges.
Wow, that's pretty.
Right here is another thin paint area. Right here is a good one. And right here. Now the thick paint areas, I just have to be careful what I'm dragging thick paint into. I'm going to go in the direction of the thickness of paint and where I'd rather get it lightened up and, you know, where I want that bright paint to go into. I don't want to cut it into dark shadow. So I'm just being a little conscious of that. I don't really have strong highlights yet. That's coming. I just, you know, I don't need them yet because none of that's even remotely close to finish. So now I'm just gonna call it for this for now. I'm gonna retire that blending brush because now it's really got a lot of paint on it, except for that one little spot right there. Just gonna knock down the ridges. I lost a little precision on that nub that you like so much, but here, I would just put it back. Why not? And you'll like it again.
It's so pretty.
There we go.
Yeah, that's...
And then let's just we'll trim the edges just a little bit. There we go. All right, so then I see the background going about to the spot that I have it, even though that's a corner, and I'm not going to do corners right now. Or I'm not going to do corners at all. I'm gonna leave it flat, the table. Like there's a corner back there that just, there's no need for it. I might even take a blending brush to the background, even though I don't mind the background getting a little wispy. It's just a little sloppy is my problem with it. I could just wait and do another round, but I don't know. I don't need to make that decision yet. So this shell, even though it's overly dark right now, is going to get brighter and read against the background even stronger. I think I want to add a little bit of green and brightness to that because I kind of like this value. That's bad. I kind of like this value a lot. If I can color match it, there it is. And I like this value. I don't want this to go in the dark trend. I'm going to have the dark trend going that way. So I need to lighten this up just a little bit. And maybe even a little lighter than that. Doesn't look terribly dark on my palette, so I have to be a little weary of that. So this is way over the top, quite by design. And we'll see how that goes on the second sitting. All right, I could block in the top of the tabletop as a bright, and that would affect these things too. I feel like those are the bigger priorities right now. I'm going to do that. I'm going to fill in the rest of the background, and then I'm going to put a little bit of a blue-gray glow back here to just feel like there's a far edge of the table.
Okay.
You know, reading through the weave. And then I'm going to have, there's this really neat edge of the weave of the tablecloth that I want to leave some dark background down here. So I'm going to go terribly dark down there and then get a little bit of a blue-gray glow back there. Just a little shift. And then I'll probably be close to done of this sitting. So
okay.
Maybe around 11:30. I don't even know what time it is. It's probably 10 by now.
It's almost 10.
Almost 10.
Yeah, like 2 minutes.
Aha. I think I am going to go darker up there.
Okay. I love that.
I just don't want to bring too much attention to the handle.
Oh, okay.
But I do like the background not being too static. I want it to shift. But I also don't have to get it exactly right. There's a lot of decisions to be made, and I think I'll make better decisions moving forward and blocking in more stuff. Like right now would be a good time to get this top of the handle darker. Or not handle, shell. Excuse me. Yeah, darker than the background. Maybe it could be a little bit lighter. Yeah, better. So again, I'm customizing the background to what I need. And if the system doesn't work, I'll see it and I'll adjust it by the next sitting. But I also don't want to get the background too thick. If the shells are a lot thicker, they'll feel like they project.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of telling you all my thoughts. Some of these aren't really that necessary to talk about. Yeah, I like that dark.
It's nice to know your thought process, though. You know, all the things that you have to consider.
Yeah, but like I said, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about is just kind of automatic. Like I don't actively think about it while I'm painting. I'm explaining it because it's not laborious to think about. It's just a lot of stuff that's automatic that maybe some people take for granted. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's just something people do anyway. But I don't know. If I say too much, everyone's going to be like, man, this guy just doesn't shut up.
No, I mean, for me, it's incredibly helpful because maybe I'll think about those things too, you know? I mean, I don't think about them now, but now that you said it, I will.
I wonder if this background's too green. I didn't think about it till now, but it might be too green.
I think it looks really nice.
Yeah,
at least on camera.
I'll put a pin on that. See, that value doesn't work because of that jump from here to there.
You think it's too much?
I think it's too dark.
Maybe, I don't know. Those shells really, I mean, that one shell is jumping out of that basket. So pretty.
It's going to get a lot more elaborate.
I know.
But I appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah, that works.
What size is that board?
The frame says 2022, but that doesn't seem right. That seems too small. I'm wondering if I cut it wrong. No, that's about right. Maybe they said it was 2022 and it's not. But
Did
it's
you
a nice.
put it in there already?
What's that?
Did you put it in the frame?
Well, I thought I did when I first cut it. So maybe I should just take a break and do it. Just put it in and see what happens. I do like how thin the molding is, so it's not going to cast much of a shadow. But even if it did, that's not a big deal, because that top of the basket is definitely not a place where I want the focal point to go.
Right.
So if it obscures the top edge and that handle is something that the viewer has to really look for, fine. Because I'm hoping if I do this successfully, everyone's going to just stare right here. Then they're going to see all the basket weave. Then they're going to see this fun stuff over here, because this has like all these little pattern of light hitting the shell. And that's really fun. It'll be a while before they even notice the top of the handle. Like if that's in shadow, that's not a big deal. So I was saying that to Natalie last week, or what was it, Saturday? Friday. It was Friday. Yeah, it was almost a week ago. It was Friday because it was we got snowed out. Remember, I had to teach figure from home.
Right. Oh yeah, right.
And I canceled the figure session.
Yes.
All right, so this little shell peeking out of the side, I should be careful with. Remember how that was looking dark at one point? It's not so dark anymore.
Right.
It's actually a really good relationship to the basket now. That's what I mean, is if you judge it too early, you might be reacting to something way out of context, and just it might be working better than you think. And that's definitely happening for that urchin shell. I think that's actually pretty close to what I see now. I might just paint through that. I don't want to. Nah, I'm gonna paint through it. I think it's a little low anyway.
Do you want to stop at 10:30?
I don't know. If I can get the whole thing covered, then maybe.
Okay.
I kind of just want to stop when I can get a good block in of everything.
Okay.
I slept okay. I don't know why I'm tired. All right, so I want the basket to read dark against light. So I might just lighten this area up just a touch, or go darker with the basket. It would make sense to get a little cooler and hazier here anyway, because we could have reflected light off of the cloth. Okay, well, we'll do that then. So now that basket weave is starting to read against the background. And if I started with a glaze, I could make the whole basket darker, keep the relationships, and still do the detail on top. So I think I'll err on the side of a little bit light here, but I'm not going to worry about making it the full range of contrast just yet. Ooh, I have to raise that side. That won't fit the shell or the basket. So another little problem solved. Okay. Background's in.
Wow.
Well, that redraw will really do a lot. But all right, so these shells I'm going to keep a little on the simple side, but now I can read their value relative to other things. Like this has a lot of brightness to it, but not in the mid-tone. That's too warm. That's way too cool. Jeez, that was a mistake. Put a lot of phthalo in it. I actually only put a little tiny dab, but that's still too much phthalo. I don't want it green. Darker. Might have to get some more umber. Can't stop yawning.
I know you're going to make me yawn.
Okay. All right. Not terribly worried about this one yet. I think that's a fine base for going brighter through here. Maybe a little bit brighter. And then I'll have plenty of value to plop those highlights on, but I'll do them with a lot of specificity. Do them with little individual drawing lines. But they'll look like this. You know, little highlights that are going to have these little tiny stripe notes. That doesn't read enough. I'm going to have to darken it. I think I had it right the first time. And that's why you do that little test.
Mm-hmm.
The highlight needed to read a lot stronger. And the only way it does that is against something darker. And it's one of my brighter highlights. So, you know, if that got close to pure white, it'd be okay. But it's not in the sort of focal area. So I might even play it down from there. So anyway. All right. Well, that's blocked in. I'll just leave that for now. The darks aren't really terribly rich, but I can put in little stripes for the edges of, you know, with these little rings that go around. And then I'll block this one in. I'll probably go pretty close to white for the table, but not my brightest light. I don't want the table as bright. I don't see it as bright as some of these shells or the highlight. So that puts it in, you know, just a range to fit into. Then I'll just work on this. I'll take a step back. I'll see what's necessary for this sitting. Leave the rest and call it for now.
Okay.
I'm painting a little bit bolder now than I was before for a couple reasons. For one, now I've really warmed up under the sitting. And for two is because this is a little less important than those really fine, intricate shapes for these shells, and not nearly as much setup work as these two shells with the iridescence. I don't want to try to do too much too early with those, but I do want to have those vivid colors to come underneath that half paste, which is not there yet. So now I'm just hacking away with pretty confident paint. Darker. Way too dark. And from too light to too dark. So this shell has the basket putting its light like projected onto the edge. It's a really neat edge. It's got this like checkerboard of light on it. I'm gonna get that on the next sitting, or maybe even the one after that. It's just low priority right now, but definitely something I want to keep in mind. There's a little flash of iridescence, or not iridescence, but projected light in here. That might even be a little aggressive, but so what?
Oh, I see what you mean about that pattern on the shell.
Yeah, it's really neat. I mean, that's why I set it up that way.
Wow, yeah, that's really cool looking.
And I hope to pull it off. I think so. I'm doing something really bad right now. I'm trying to paint around the idea that it ran out of umber just because this might be the last moment of need, and I'm doing it wrong. Because you should never paint the wrong paint just because you ran out of one. You should stop and get new paint. And I shall. All right, that's probably about as far as I'm gonna take that one. One little touch, but then I'll call it on that one. I'll get a big block into the cloth on the top plane, and you know, get that really dark down there for the sake of all the little holes in the weave of the cloth. So more paint. Five watchers, nice.
On YouTube?
Yeah, nice.
Okay.
Happy to have them. Here I am just rambling along.
Actually, you've been very quiet.
Very quiet. I don't think quiet.
A little.
I'm still thinking the background's too green. I might do something about that, but it's gonna be all right. So I'm gonna go pretty close to quite dark down here. I might add just a tiny bit of white to that, but quite dark. Again, that's going to be where we don't see any of the far part of the cloth. It's like we're on the shadow of the table. And I am clearly out of paint. And I better do something about it. All right. So I might need another pass of the background anyway. I could just do that on the next sitting. I'm not really that happy with how green it is.
So are you
not like I don't like green. It's just it's too like I'd rather have a muted color to read all this richness against. Anyway.
Okay.
What were you gonna say?
So does that mean you're calling it a night, or?
No, I'm gonna still block in the bottom part. I just have to get more paint.
Okay.
I'm gonna block in the top of the table. I'm gonna block in the bottom of all that stuff that reads through here, and then if I can resist, then I'll be done. And if I can't resist, then I'll rework that background. It's really just that simple. I have a hard time stopping painting if I have a soft deadline. Soft deadline meaning sleep.
Okay.
Well, you know how like at the end of the figure sessions on Friday, it's like I have to ask people to help me stop. Like put the brushes down.
I know.
I know you know. I don't mind some of the green coming through here. I think the green was partially why I didn't think that looked particularly green, but now all the green is gone, and that's why I think now it looks green because it's not reading against something greener. I mean, your perception of the painting changes as you get more information, which is precisely why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like just simple relationships, squinting, not worrying about detail, not worried about perfect transitions or perfect colors, but just kind of relationships that I can change my mind later without losing any detail or softness. I don't have to protect anything. I don't have to paint super tight on the next sitting, or on this sitting to correct. Next sitting, I might start honing it in a lot more, but there's going to be a point where I'm going to throw my brushes. There's going to be a point where I work maybe like on one shell at a time. It's just not ready yet until I feel like they're all kind of harmonizing. And yeah, it's getting close. Like that's really far off. So is this, but those are the strategy on those is multiple sittings, and I know where I'm going with them. Again, there's going to be an X factor of what that actually looks like when I get the paint down. So I'd say it was an effective sitting.
Definitely. I love the way that that's looking right now with the black or the dark.
Oh, down here?
Yeah, because it looks like it's moving a little bit.
You know, I just made a mistake. Not a big one. But I want to feel like there's a table in here. So I put blue there, but it doesn't belong. Right here belongs like there's a little flash of table reading through the cloth. Now, I don't see it that way because my little shelving here is thin. Like it's only like a half an inch thick. So I'm going to pretend that my table is about, inch and a half, 2 inches. So I'm going to put this in there as if there's a table there, just making it up. And then I'm going to put that sort of blue-gray, and that's the hint that maybe we're seeing past this plane to the next plane of cloth hanging down on the other side. And, it's not that I even have to, because that far side of the table could be thoroughly in shadow and so dark that you wouldn't see it. But again, I'm just playing right now. That sounds pretty good to me to put that in. And so some of these elements I'm just making up a little bit. I mean, the dark is just the dark. We're going to read that through all these little stitches of fabric, of weave.
Yeah, but the way that you have it, it's uneven, so it looks real. It looks realistic. to me.
Great. Appreciate it.
I mean, I'm just looking at it from my vantage point.
Well, I'm looking at it like there's potential, like nothing's really set yet. I mean, that's a leap of faith. These are pretty good guesses, I think. I'm going to have to redesign the basket a little bit as I go from simple to specific. So as I weave these, it's probably going to change a little bit as I feel like, okay, this weave really has to fit this way and I need more space or less or whatever. I'm still going to err on the side of cutting rather than adding. But sometimes you just get to a point where it's like, I better do it this way, even if it's not exactly what I want. I don't know. I don't really have to compromise either. It's just going to be play it by ear type thing. That's all. That's what I'm really trying to say. But that's going to be just drawing with umber and medium, right? It's going to be thinned down. It's going to be a glaze, and yeah, it'll just be a complete redraw because this is just super simple right now. And the original block in with the drawing was maybe a little, like I said, it was risky not to do a thumbnail sketch because I was a little on the big side, and then I started running out of room at the top, and then I started making all decisions to cut rather than add. But with that handle so high, I definitely don't want to expand it too much. So I'm still on the mindset that as I make it more complex, I want to cut, but I have a lower limit of that too, because I can't go so small that the shells couldn't fit in the basket. I'm thinking about those things. It's not, not anything I'm worried about. I should probably take a T-square to that table because I don't do straight edges particularly well.
Are you getting rid of all that green?
Yeah.
Oh, I like it so much.
What, this bright green?
Yeah.
It's going to have the weave of the cloth over it.
I know, but I really like it.
It's just not dark enough. The weave wouldn't contrast against it. I'm glad you liked it.
Okay.
I'm not getting rid of it because to hurt your feelings.
Well, I have a picture of it.
Okay. Yeah, I like that scumbly green look. It's just that the tenor of this painting is going to be a lot of texture, a lot of detail, a lot of intricacy. So while I like all that abstract element, I could have kept it in the background a little bit. But down here, I need darks for the light cloth.
I know.
So that is really important, and I'm trying to get setup work for the next sitting. In that, the more this can dry, and then I'll take my T-squares to it and everything. If this is thoroughly dry, then putting the half paste of the weave on top is going to go a lot better. And so it's important to get this stage in here. I don't know if I'll need a second stage. And then I definitely don't want to be ready to do the cloth and not have it be thoroughly dry.
Right.
So, yeah, no offense.
I know.
All right. So.
Not about me.
Well, you'll see. Okay, I'll tell you what. I am all ears if I get that weave in and then you still say, you know what? It was better when it had the green.
No. It's just, like how Natalie was saying, she likes different stages.
Oh, yeah, I like the stages too. No, I agree with that.
That's so interesting.
I said I wasn't going to do the background, but I can't help it. Now the background I could get that sort of wispy look back with a glaze. So I could definitely have gone a little thicker with the paint back here, but I don't know. The purpose of today was just simply to cover ground and make better decisions on the next sitting when I've got more to play with, like more things to consider. Now I've got all these colors and values in the sense of light wrapping around form. So that next sitting is going to have a lot more information than the previous. And I think I've made pretty decent decisions for this sitting.
Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous.
I'm going to add that shell back in later because I just don't feel like addressing it right now. So those are some of the decision making. I'm going to go ahead and put some of these cast shadows in. That's too dark. And I could warm that up a little bit because it could be getting a little tiny bit of influence from the basket. That's not dark enough. Better. Starting with the shadows, not only because I want to keep them a little thinner, but also too is because if I take the shadows too far, then I just cut in with them with the light. Ooh, I'm losing my shell. It's okay. All right, I'll just put the shell back in. No big deal. And then back here, way too dark. Whoa. Better. So I took that reflected light a little too far too. I think it's nice to take if you can do it consciously and not be worried about it looking bad, then taking one form too far and then cutting it with the next as a conscious decision, that really helps for soft edges. So like if I take the shadow too far, it doesn't matter because I'm gonna bring that light into it anyway. I can reshape the edge just like this reflected light. Now that has a little bit of a softness to it because I worked wet paint right into wet paint. Now I went across the form, so it's not gonna blend so much, but at least it's gonna be wet paint into wet paint. All right, so now I'll just start piling on off-white, not white, because I don't even see that. Well, I don't see the table as my brightest light.
I do see on the table. That's what you mean.
Yeah,
right?
The table. I do see a little bit of warmth. I'm gonna put a tiny bit of yellow ochre in it. The light source is warm, so that makes sense too. But I see it, more so than just saying that the light source is warm. There's that edge. So not only did I make the shape more like what I see, but I also got the edge that I want. So that's why I took the table a little, I took the cast shadow a little too far. It's not like I couldn't then go back and put more paint on it, but it can be really efficient if I just paint right into the edge. There's a little space of light back there. So maybe I'll have to redesign that shadow after all, but I like that little moment right there. Started mixing with the So I'll have to get a T-square involved because my table ledge is all kinds of wonky. Back here is a tricky moment of the still life because this shelf is it has those supports in the back. Well, they're not letting the table truly go flat behind the setup. So it's all kind of bunched up back here, and I don't want that.
Okay.
So I just have to envision as if it were flatter. It's not a big imaginative thing, but it
Oh, I see what you mean, because of the support.
Yeah, it stops me from just painting what I see.
Okay, I see what you mean. That's a very pretty cast shadow.
Thanks.
So you just did that wet on wet, right?
Well, I took the shadow too far, and then I took the table into the edge, and then I'm bringing the shadow back out, but not all the way. And that last brush stroke was just a mistake. I don't want a high contrast on the table line.
Okay.
That's just really distracting. Anything that has contrast it grabs the eye. And so I want to be a little selective of what's grabbing the eye. And definitely not where the cloth meets the background. That to me isn't an exciting area. So my grandmother was a master at that. You know, it was like the table just disappeared and nobody noticed. All right. So I had to reestablish this because I slipped and I didn't really want to paint around it anyway. So it's just like, you know what? I'll just go right through it. Reestablish it. Easy peasy. The only thing I would hesitate to draw, to really avoid so I wouldn't have to redraw it again is if I had detail. So if I had a detailed eye on a portrait, I don't want to redraw that by just being sloppy with the stuff I have to put around it. So I'd much rather spend more time on the things that are around it. You know, the eye socket, the the cheekbones, all that stuff. You know, zygomatic and supraorbital ridge. Like those to me are early shapes. The eye itself fits into that socket, so I'd much rather wait. And that way I don't have to avoid them. And I wouldn't have to get angry if I accidentally painted over my eye. And I can paint maybe just a little bit more free because I don't have to protect anything. This back here is part of the basket weave, and this right here is part of the shell. So I don't really see it dramatically different, but wouldn't it be better if those shapes didn't mimic each other and that this got lighter and softer? Because those are the properties of cast shadow anyway. And who knows how far this basket would cast a shadow. So there is a way to figure it out if you know the direction and intensity of the light source, but I don't know if the viewer of my work is going to analyze it to that level. So rather just create a bigger difference between this shadow and that shadow. And just run it right off. All right, good. Complete my idea of the table here. When I did the shell collection painting, I added the holes here in perspective, but they were really weak because we're not looking at the side of the table. We're looking at the top where all the weaves, as they go back in space, they start overlapping the holes. And so I want these to be bold. I want up here to be pretty weak. So not having rich darks to read through it, I think, is a good strategy.
Oh, I see. The tablecloth is on the top too.
Yep.
Of course, yeah, that makes sense.
So maybe in YouTube I'll flash a sign saying this shell is too dark and too colorful on purpose. Anyway.
Well, it's, you've been talking about it, so I think, you could tell.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you for a fact that I put on videos that I don't listen to. I just watch while I'm doing something else. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think if anybody watches this stage and then gets to the more detail phases, then they'll understand why I did what I did.
I understand.
All right. Well, what do you think?
It looks really cool.
We're at 11? Almost.
Yeah.
Well, I did that pretty fast.
Yeah, you did. It looks really great.
All right. Well, maybe I do have a little bit of time for the background. Again, this dichotomy between the gray and the blue-gray and the black is just envisioning that there's going to be a far end of the cloth, completely invented. This needs a half paste. That needs bright highlights. So there's just a lot of things that I'm trying to think of a good timing for. And I told you about that glow there. That's going to look even more pronounced when this gets brighter.
Yeah.
So I'm anticipating that. I didn't bother with the weave because I want to just draw. So just think about it. If I have just raw umber or burn umber and medium, I can just draw these, and if I don't like it, or if I slip or something, I can just wipe it right back to this level and redraw it. So that's the timing and strategy of that. And that's why I don't want to put the shells going through the slats just yet. I ignored this little oyster shell coming out of the side, but I might put that in later. It just didn't feel worth it to me to paint around. And now that I get to see this cloth, I want the soft edge anyway. I might just brighten the background and take away a little bit of that green. It didn't look all that green when I first started it, but now it looks really, really green. And it's not like I don't like green. I do like green. It's just I'd rather the background be a little on the gray side so that this iridescent seems colorful and the basket seems colorful and these look stark bright. So that's just going to be a value thing, but this is a color thing here. So I could just glaze it on the next sitting. I could glaze it with raw umber. It would go darker. It would go less colorful. And that would make, this be more colorful and this more colorful relatively. And that would make this lighter against darker relatively. And I'm not ruling that out for the next sitting. Just some thoughts. Again, I don't have to figure everything out on this sitting. I just have to give myself enough information to make good decisions on the next round. And I just keep saying how I was going to go darker, but I'm going lighter here just to help that read, and I can make up the story of the cloth reflecting its bright whiteness into the dark background. And that will leave light against the dark basket, dark cast shadow and shell against the light background, and then we shift darker, and then this stuff reads bright against the dark background, and the system is custom built around what I really want it to support. And so the background is just more of a support element than anything. Sometimes, your background is really important for the composition. This is, I I'd say very important, just not descriptive. It's supportive. It doesn't complete the story. It just kind of makes, you know, light against dark and dull against colorful and thin against thick, and you know, just really hopefully supports the subject. Need thicker paint in here too. A little bit of a timing with oil paint. I put this background in long enough ago that it sticks just a little bit more, like the paint is set up just a tiny bit. That might not happen with everybody's materials, but I have lead in my oil. I cooked it into there, so it helps the oils dry. And so just in that little bit of time since I stopped working on the background and went to the shells and the table, it's set up just a little bit. So now when I try to put a brush stroke down, well, anytime I put a brush stroke down, it'll sit on top because again, it has a thickness to it. But when I'm really moving paint around like this and kind of blending wet into wet with more of a scumble, then as the paint gets really weak, I might start pulling up paint rather than adding it. And so that's why I just, you know, I left good enough alone for a while. I knew that by the time I finished everything else, I'd have a different perception of this background, and it actually appears greener than when I started. I mentioned that a few times. But also too, it's set up a little bit so that I can layer paint just a little smoother and easier without it pulling up these little kind of dots of the brush stroke pulling up paint. So there we go. I think this sitting is good for drying and making good decisions on the next round. So I think I'm gonna, maybe I'll blend that a tiny bit, but I think I should be done soon.
Okay.
Maybe in the next 10 minutes.
That's a great plan.
Three-hour sitting. All right, but if I do blend, I want it to be a super clean blending brush. I don't want any paint to drag into it, and I'm gonna just barely tickle the surface. The reason I want to do this is because there is some directional brush strokes that might suggest something that I don't want it to, because all these little ridges will have a very intentional direction to them. And I don't want anything else distracting from that. So like I said, normally I don't blend, but I really don't feel like taking the extra step of carefully manipulating these with brush strokes, because I just kind of want to be done. And this will do the job for this round. And so even though I don't like blending all that much, it seems appropriate. Isn't that smushy look that it gives? That's what I don't like about it. Some people love it. Some artists do a fantastic job with leaving that sort of smushiness and making it look good. So I'm definitely not judging anybody. Just my personal preference. I don't like it as much. Hey, that was a bad choice. Put that back. Better. I don't need blending in here. The busyness of the pattern will do a fine job. So that was a mistake. My blending brush picked up some of this opaque stuff here and it applied it into the richness there. So the opacity of what it picked up kind of really kills this sort of intensity. So that was a mistake. I make mistakes.
Impossible.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like I mean, it's obvious I make mistakes. I mean, that's just a given. But you know, sometimes if like you study with me and you're comparing it to the struggles that you have, but I had all those struggles when I was getting started. You know, it's just, I don't know. Just you see a lot of people demonstrate, and just if they don't say they're making a mistake, you might not even know, because they do it calmly and they problem solve it really like effortlessly, and then you don't even know they made a mistake in the first place, because there's no big reaction to it, and it's not an eyesore in the first place. It's just something that has to have that next step to bring it together or something. So I don't know. I just like to say it, like, okay, this is a bit of a mistake. This was an error judgment, things like that, because I mean, I think it's nice for students to hear. All right, let's call it for today.
That's it? Okay.
That's
That
it.
looks good.
Oh. Let's do another round of moving the camera around. You can see the setup again. And I'll clean up. So I'll start with YouTube. Okay, what is this? Hey, Hans, didn't realize you were live again. Thank you for displaying your progress. Yeah, thanks for coming. And Anna, greetings to you too. Rosemary, enjoying the process. Thank you so much. Sandra, thanks for joining me. Love the composition. I so much appreciate that. And BA, thanks for joining. All right, so this is square to the camera, and we'll go into the wildness of this. That's going to be brought together by a half paste. This is going to get refinement, a lot of refinement, and then it's going to get these little stripes that go over these little ridges and stripes. I mean, that thing is busy as can be. And here's the basket. The basket's got all these really nice cascading weaves, and then you can see the shells through the weaves. That's really super cool. And there's that far shell that has the projected light going through it. The tablecloth is going to get all that complexity. So this has a long way to go. This is a good second sitting. Big color block in, squint level shapes only, and then anticipatory stuff like going way too green, way too dark, way too pink for the that iridescent shell. Not worrying about the highlights of that conical one, because that can go on with precision instead of simplification. So a lot of decision making. And so Liz, I'll take I'll take this for a little tour, and you can see it up close.
Oh yeah, it's gorgeous.
And here's the setup again.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's completely washed out, because I have a bright light on it, and a lot of times cameras can't handle that kind of brightness. But if you look closely at that really crazy shell back there, and all the little dots on that urchin, and the greens and pinks of that iridescent shell, and then all the weaves of the basket and the craziness of the cloth. I mean, this is an ambitious one. But anyway, whoa, what happened? Whoopsie. What did I do?
Now I see you.
You see me? I don't see me.
Now I see you.
There I am. Okay, well, thanks, Liz.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. I'm going to hang up, but thank you for joining me. All right, cool. So you're welcome. All right, I'm gonna end the stream. Thank you all so much.